Reality therapist perception.
All right, welcome to Reactivity TV. Amy and I are doing things a little differently today. We're going to be talking about multiple TV shows, right? All TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple TV shows. We are keeping up with our unhealthy relationship content. And as a reminder, we are giving our therapist perspective of these things. So, sorry if my human self just might creep in there every once in a while.
I was laughing as I watched our last segment because you very, very nicely said, we're giving our therapist perspective. And then I'm like, this show is trash.
I think I said, this is our therapist perspective, but the show sucks.
So yes, as you're saying, we do have a little bit of humanity come out in this, and because they're not our clients, we can let ourselves be more biased and a little bit more judgmental than we are allowed to be and allow ourselves to be in our actual work. But yeah, giving our therapist take on several different relationships that are all TV relationships, and kind of giving our takes. And I know we have some different ones to discuss. So Let's kick it off for us, Catherine.
Okay. So I will be talking about Summer and Seth from the OC. I'm just going to kick it back to, we're in the early 2000s. We're in Newport, California, and life is good.
And you wear bikinis as tops
everywhere
at all times.
Everyone's really rich. And that's where we're starting here. Their houses look great. I always wanted to go there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Summer and Seth, I'm not going to give like a whole background on them, because if you haven't seen the OC now, you either don't want to or like, what are you doing? But I love that show. So what I noticed in reflecting on Summer and Seth's relationship was that I didn't really see any red flags about it until the turn of the show between season 3 and season 4, which was after the major tragedy in the show, and also when they all go to college. So Seth started lying to Summer. He didn't tell her that he wasn't going to Brown, and he ended up staying home, and she was there and all by herself. And I think she was going there because of him. And then he didn't end up going. So he started this lack of trust in the relationship. And it really was seemingly around his own self-esteem and his own issues that he was dealing with. But it really impacted the trust in the relationship. And so the way that I would like to label this relationship, at least at that time, was unhealthy. But I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt of being teenagers and like 18 years old and not really knowing how to navigate relationships. And ultimately their relationship seemed to strengthen and go on, and they did end up getting married in the end. So that's my Summer and Seth analysis.
Right. And what happens after they say, I do, we don't know. But you're right. I mean, what we saw was a lack of maturity, and which makes sense. I mean, they were in high school, and then 18, 19, like in that like third, fourth season. And so like, that makes sense. You're such a newbie to a relationship, and you don't really know how to figure it out or like how to navigate through these things. And so it's kind of understandable if they were like 10 years forward, like 29, 30, that might be a different story around kind of like withholding the truth and that kind of thing. Like you might,
unless it was their first relationship.
Oh, true. Yeah. Right. It's true. So I think, yeah, the age plays a major role in there. So yeah, I think it's hard to label it as unhealthy or healthy. I think it's just immature.
Yeah. Cool. What's your first one?
So my first one, I wanted to talk about a relationship on Sex and the City. And despite the fact that I could probably talk about Carrie and Big and Aiden all day long, I want to talk about another couple, which is Miranda and Steve. And so because Sex and the City is such a long show, plus 2 movies, plus a spinoff, and Just Like That, we have a lot of timeline in terms of their relationship. But essentially it kind of started off with kind of a mismatch around what felt like maybe values around whether it was career or finances or things like that, where there seemed to be a misalignment. In our episode about unhealthy relationships, part 1, we talked about power, and we saw power dynamics play out a lot within, especially the early part of Miranda and Steve's relationship. And I'm thinking of one episode in particular where they're going to, I think, a work function for Miranda, and he had to wear a suit, and the only suit that Steve owned was a corduroy, like a brown corduroy suit. And she was like, "You can't wear that. I'll buy you a suit." And the suit was, or let's go find you a suit. The suit was very expensive. She ended up buying him the suit. And that seemed to emasculate him or make him feel emasculated. And it caused kind of an argument. And so we see Miranda and Steve kind of navigate a lot of conflict, mostly based around kind of that seemed to be a little bit of a mismatch. They end up breaking up. Then they have this kind of like one night stand where it results in an unplanned pregnancy. And as Miranda kind of famously says, Steve, your one ball and my lazy ovary like created this baby. And so, in a lot of ways, it was a miracle. And so they decide to have a child together and co-parent. And it's through the co-parenting that they kind of reestablish a like and a love. And that can happen, right? Like when you go through different phases of a relationship, and particularly like when you become parents, like that does restore, renew, create a different sense of love for this, this person that you've created together. And so it's not necessarily surprising that in a lot of ways that kind of rekindled old romantic feelings. But as we kind of see, the same dynamics continue to play out, that love that brought them back together, Brady, through their son, wasn't sustainable because it wasn't really based on their relationship, Miranda and Steve. And so
are you saying that a child didn't fix their problem?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. And again, it can, for a short time, like put some rose-colored glasses around things, for sure, because it's beautiful and exciting and all that stuff. But if that's the only thing keeping you together, that it's not going to be very sustainable. And so we kind of watch that play out over the course of years. And again, kind of like you said, related to Seth and Summer, I won't rehash their whole relationship, but we continue to see, like often in relationships, we see people having the same fights over and over. It's the same issue that keeps coming up. And we see like the issue that we continue to see coming up over and over again is kind of Miranda's dominance and Steve's more passivity, and where Miranda almost feels as though she has to parent Steve, which is not very sexy. That has an impact on their sex life. There is infidelity on both ends, and as it most recently in And Just Like That, the spinoff show, Miranda and Steve have decided to divorce. And so we kind of watch this relationship that in a lot of ways was over before it started. But I bring them up because I think they are such a good example of what we talked about, like why people stay in relationships. They had a child together. They had a home together. They have a huge history together. They have navigated really tough things. They have been through loss and changes in career, like with one another. They've been through so much together, but sometimes that's not enough. And so I wanted to highlight their relationship. My vote on healthy, unhealthy, I think they decided for us, not healthy, not sustainable. Or maybe actually scratch that. I think it could have been sustainable in And Just Like That. I don't know if you saw that. But they kind of become roommates. They're good friends. They, again, have been together for, I forget how many years, over a decade. They have their routine. They sit and watch TV and eat ice cream every night. But there was no passion. There was no romance. They weren't dating each other anymore. They were coexisting. They were being parents. And that we also see in relationships a lot. It was really, really comfortable. They probably, again, could have continued. It was functioning, but it wasn't working for either of them. And so, yeah.
Well, yeah, their relationship goes through a lot of different seasons.
Literally.
Over the course of the season. Yeah.
What else you got?
Another HBO show, Succession. I know you also enjoy this show.
Love.
Yes.
Even though it gives me so much anxiety to watch. It's so stressful. Sorry, go ahead.
So I'm going to talk about Shiv and Tom. Yes.
Yikes.
Cringe. Yeah. So their relationship starts before the show starts. So I'm sure there were a lot of existing things before we even jumped into their lives on HBO on Sunday nights. I'm advertising it.
Coming back in April.
Yeah. Coming soon. But we do see prior to them getting married that she does sleep with somebody else. And then she asks him for an open relationship afterwards.
Once they're married.
So there's a few challenging things about that. Of course, she went outside the relationship and then went into the marriage with certain expectations or assuming certain expectations, and then dropped the bomb on him on the wedding night that she wants an open relationship. Outside of that, she looks down on him pretty often. She makes the relationship all about her and her family. And obviously the show is all about seeking power and their children trying to overthrow their dad and be the next CEO of this company. But you see her seeking power not only in her family, but also in her relationship with Tom. That the power dynamics that are at play are just quite evident. And she begins to set this precedent. And I'm not, blaming everything on Shiv here because Tom's a part of the relationship too, right? But she does set this precedent of retaliation in the relationship. And ultimately, we see at the end of this last season that Tom totally undermines her and takes the power back and tells Papa Logan what's going on to put himself in power. Mm-hmm. So he plays into her game.
That was shocking, actually. I mean, and there was a part of me that felt I could have stood and I could have given him a standing ovation because we see him getting walked all over throughout the entire series. And then we see in turn how he kind of turns that, and he becomes kind of like more of the aggressor with like Greg or even some of his employees, using them as tables and things like that. But you bring up the power dynamics here. And in season 1, I think it's when they try to do quote unquote family therapy. Logan, in the midst of them having an argument, tells Shiv, you are marrying a man who is not good enough for you because, you essentially like you feel safe in that, like that's comfortable for you. And we see that play out and her kind of exploit that. And yeah.
So unhealthy.
Yeah. I'd 1,000%. Yeah.
Like I'm not even rooting for them.
Not at all. I'm rooting for them to split up. I'm rooting for Tom to bury Shiv.
Yeah.
But mostly because I guess I'm having like a personal reaction to like it's my own stuff, my own values coming up around marriage and what I think marriage means and what I think a partnership means. And then seeing the way that she treats her marriage and treats Tom, it's just like, whoa, so disrespectful. And again, that's such a biased opinion in there. But yeah, Shiv is my least favorite character, if you can't tell.
She's not my least favorite, but maybe because she's just really entertaining.
You'll have to tell me who your least favorite is later.
Yeah. To think about it. It might be Logan. But that's too obvious. I don't know.
I love Logan. I think I'm toxic.
I just think he needs some more lines other than fuck off.
Yeah, I know. It's true. It is a good catchphrase.
It is.
Summarizes him. It's very on brand.
But he's not supposed to be likable. So yeah, they're doing a good job of that.
Wait, can I put in a request that when Succession comes back, we talk about it and like from a family systems perspective?
Oh, I would love that.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay. Stay tuned. Okay. The next couple I want to talk about is from Gossip Girl, one of my all-time favorite shows. And as much as I would love to talk about Blair and Chuck, hold on. Well, I'm not going to talk about Blair and Chuck, but what I will say about Blair and Chuck is that I think it is masterful what the writers did to make such a toxic couple be one that you root for. And that I think is what is problematic about Blair and Chuck is that so many of us grew up watching them and rooting for them, and it instilled in us a lot of ideas about relationships and what relationships are supposed to be. Like, no wonder so many of us like don't know.
So true.
Look what you talked about. The OC grew up that like those relationships, horrible. Sex in the City.
It's the same creator.
Oh, fair. Okay.
Gossip Girl. Yeah. They did it again.
There it is. So I still ship Blair and Chuck all day. Sorry. Again, it's me. I'm the problem here. But I wanted to talk about Serena and Dan instead. And Serena and Dan are such a good example of repeating things that we've seen growing up. They are essentially, almost literally, playing out the relationship that their parents had with one another. And I think watching that dynamic throughout the entire series was so interesting because it's kind of like this story of this like less affluent man pining after this like wealthy princess of New York City and like the forbidden romance of it all. And it would cause so many problems for us to be together, but like kind of a Romeo and Juliet type of situation. And And we watch it combust so many times. And they're another couple that continues to have kind of the same fight over and over again around, I guess, kind of that they together don't fit in their world together. That is the fight that they have again across the series. And that's the same fight that Rufus and Lily had. And so it's really interesting because we almost got a flash forward. Yes, Serena and Dan did get married at the end, but we almost got the flash forward with Rufus and Lily. We watched them. We saw, okay, they had this unrequited romance and love, and they finally get together, and then they get married, and the shit still exists after marriage. The marriage dissolves in divorce, and they go on and meet partners that are better suited for them. Lily and Chuck Bass Sr. Is that his name? I'm sorry, Bart Bass. Yeah. And Rufus and Lisa Loeb make total sense for who compatible partners are for those people. And it wouldn't surprise me if we get some sort of information around, Serena and Dan at some point later in life not being together. Although I think in the Gossip Girl reboot, they're trying to say that they're still together. I think there's a reference to that, perhaps. But it would be really surprising, and it would, if they are in fact still together, it would mean that they've either done a lot of work, or B, that they're operating two completely different lives, and like they're not actually a partnership. So if things continue as they were, they will just kind of like coexist, or they do a ton of work together to kind of get to the resolution around this conflict they continue to have.
I have a question about what you said about Lily and Rufus later on, that Lily finds someone she's compatible with, and so does Rufus. Do you think they really do? Do you think they're really compatible, or this is just convenient and it makes sense because this person's in my world?
I think Lily is completely all about power. Like loves power and influence. And she is so clout chasing, and that is who she is. And that is who Bart is. And Bart had said to her, essentially, like, I know who you are. I know you have this thing going on with Rufus. I know, I get it. If you want to be with me, end it. Like, he sees her for who she is and accepts her for it. And I think that's actually what Lily needs, because I think Rufus wanted her to change and be different, and kind of like had this vision or expectation around this girl that she could have been, or this, we see kind of like a flashback in one episode of like, Lily as like a college student or however old she was. And she was like in a rebellion stage at that point, but like we always knew. And as we always saw, she always came kind of like back home, so to speak. She is, CeCe Rhodes' daughter. Like, she is, that's her destiny. That's what she chooses over and over and over again. And so, yeah, I think that for them, that makes sense. They have a common value, and that is power and dominance, and taking any means necessary to get there. And then, Rufus and Lisa Loeb, I don't know enough about Lisa Loeb, except the fact that she, was a 90s kind of icon. And I think that is probably good for Rufus to have someone who actually appreciates him, the lifestyle that he wants, something that's important to him, something that he's passionate about. That makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did I convince you?
Yeah, you did. You really did.
As I was saying all of that, it made me both surprised and embarrassed that I know so much about this show, and
I'm surprised you have a name
that I could provide such a thorough analysis.
How many times have you watched it through?
Oh my God, a lot. Like more than 5 times. Yeah.
I've definitely watched it through twice. One was like live when you had to wait for it every week. And then the other was like when I was in college later on.
Oh, it still holds up.
Yeah.
So still quite good.
Yeah. I mean, you talking about it made me really want to watch it. So it's on what, HBO? Oh, look at that. Another HBO show.
Another HBO show.
HBO, do you want to sponsor our reactivity TV? The OC is also on HBO now. And so is
HBO. We're here for you. What's your next one?
One Tree Hill. So back to the spot that the OC was in, except, just over on the East Coast, North Carolina.
Wait, can I just tell you? I just realized that my next one is also on HBO.
Oh, yeah, and you said Sex and the City, and that's HBO.
Okay. Sorry.
Wow. Okay.
One Tree Hill.
So One Tree Hill. I am going to talk about Nathan and Haley. So if you can remember, Nathan and Haley got married while they were in high school. They also got married pretty quickly into their relationship. So I don't remember exactly how long they'd been dating, but it wasn't very long. And quickly after they got married, Haley left. She left to go on tour because that also happens in high school. Sorry. But that's not why we watch these shows, right? Okay. So she left to go on tour. Right. She sings. So she was going on tour to like do an opening act or something. Anyway, which like all well and good. Girl got a friggin' tour gig. Are you kidding? Amazing. Like go for it. That wasn't really the issue. The issue was that she totally left Nathan in the dust. Apparently it was a choice. It had to be one or the other. It couldn't be both and. So she was on tour and they were still married. And she didn't talk to him and she didn't call him. She didn't, I think were they writing each other letters at the time? I don't know, probably. But they were not in contact with each other.
Cell phones did exist.
Yeah, well, definitely late in the seasons. I don't remember if in the beginning. No, yeah, I think she has a cell phone. Yeah.
So there was like a means, there was accessibility to contact him.
Accessibility, Amy, there were payphones, I'm sure, somewhere. There were payphones probably all over the place if there were no cell phones. So it's not the choice that was made, but it was the choice and how it played out. Because it really didn't seem like there had to be a choice at all, but obviously it doesn't make for good TV. So, right after making this commitment to marriage, to be together forever, right? And to consider each other and making, life-altering decisions, this is what happens. And he lost his trust in her. So because she eventually did come back and he wanted nothing to do with her. And it took a really, really long time for him to, for her to build that trust back. I'm sorry. It took a really long time for him to build trust back in her. And she did, she really worked for it over a long period of time. And she kept, I know you hate this, but like she kept fighting for the relationship. And at that point, it kind of like makes sense. She was really trying to win him back, essentially. And kind of similar to my analysis around the OC, that like these are teenagers and like it's going to happen. So there's a lot of immaturity at stake here. Or a lot of immaturity involved here. But I do think actually, to be honest, I never finished the show because it was one of those ones that I felt like just plummeted after they got out of high school because it wasn't cute anymore. I did keep watching it a little bit, but anyways, I don't know what happened in the end. I imagine they ended up together because like, why not? But do you think that after they rekindled their relationship and set that foundation up again, I think that it became a healthier relationship. But at the beginning, no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't finish either, but yes, I agree. And I know we have a conversation with one of our therapists, Carly King, coming up soon around, premarital therapy. But like, in order for a marriage to have a chance to be successful, it's important for there to be some foundation. And given the whirlwind of the romance and the age at which they got married, it was really rocky, and it put the relationship at such a risk to kind of make that choice. And so, again, it's kind of one of those things where like it would surprise me if they were together without having to work a lot on it. And I could understand like needing to rebuild trust after that. That makes a lot of sense.
What is your last one?
My last one is maybe a little bit controversial because it's a show based in fantasy, which I guess, as we've been saying, they all kind of are. But this one in particular, I'm talking about the Vampire Diaries on HBO Max. And I'm talking about Elena and Damon. And so throughout the show, throughout the beginning part of the show, we see this kind of love triangle form between Elena, Stefan, and Damon. And while Elena is initially with Stefan, she has this kind of like chemistry with Damon, and they end up being in a relationship. Where it gets problematic is that Elena, okay, let's state the obvious.
They're brothers.
They're brothers. Damon and Stefan are brothers. They're also vampires, which is relevant. And Elena is a human. Elena never wants to be a vampire. However, life comes at you hard, and she ends up turning into a vampire, but she is sired to Damon, meaning that Damon is the one who turned her into a vampire. And as a result, per vampire rules on Vampire Diaries, who you are sired to, like there is kind of like a built-in loyalty to that, just based on the bond that exists like in that sired relationship. And so it kind of creates, again, I feel like what I keep saying on repeat is like these power dynamics between Damon and Elena, and I think we kind of forget that is a part of their relationship. That kind of creates kind of this artificiality around the closeness or the bond or the chemistry that they have, is that it's based in control, actually. And we also see their relationship get like volatile. Damon tries to kill Elena's brother. Like Damon acts in such problematic and destructive ways. And Elena continues to be in a relationship with him, despite putting herself, her family, her friends, repeatedly at risk. And I have to wonder how much of that, again, had to do with this control in their relationship. And so, yes, of course, vampires don't exist in real life, but those kinds of control dynamics do, where if there is that sense of a controlling dynamic, that sense of a strong loyalty, that it can really cause you to, whether it's overlook or rationalize or over-explain, a kind of like apologize for, take responsibility for these really, really problematic things that the person that you're in a relationship with does. And so that if we take the vampire dynamic out of it, that part is really, really problematic, very unhealthy, potentially abusive. And so my vote is not healthy.
Mm. Wow. I love the point about just how like stuck people can get in loyalty and in like, well, it's loyalty and sometimes pride that like I said I was going to do this, so I must follow through with it. That tends to also come into play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. The other dynamic that existed within their relationship we see play out when Elena is still like amongst the living, and also when she's like in her weird spell coma.
I don't remember that.
Oh, I let me just say I never saw Vampire Diaries before the pandemic, and I started watching because I was like, what the heck else am I going to do? And it has like 1,000 episodes, so it's like taken me forever to get through. But I just finished it, so it's like fresh on my mind. But yes, there was a point at which, when in real life the actress that plays Elena wanted to be off the show, they wrote in like a plot where like there was a curse put on Bonnie and Elena, and as long as Bonnie was living, Elena had to be in a coma, and Elena couldn't come out of the coma. I'm calling it a coma, but like basically coma until Bonnie dies. And so Bonnie and Elena could never coexist at the same time, was like the spell. And so Bonnie being alive was like a threat to Elena and Damon being able to be together, kind of thing. So yes.
So then they paid her more money so she stayed on the show?
No, she was off. She was off for like 2 seasons, and she came back for like the very last episode.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I did not watch that show all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. It was hard to watch after all that happened.
Yeah.
But anyway, a lot of like Damon's narrative in the show is that, or the narrative is that Stefan's the good brother and Damon is the bad brother. And Damon does a lot to kind of like fulfill that narrative, to confirm that narrative. He's very impulsive, doesn't have a lot of empathy. Like he does things that are destructive to himself and to others. And then with Elena, she's like this goddess, this princess, this like chaste, like beautiful person that he never feels like he's good enough for. And again, it's his brother's girl. So there's always this sense of like, I need to, and people kind of use it to motivate him. Like, you need to be a good person for Elena. What would Elena think if she knew that you were doing this? And so the only way or motivation to modify his behavior was for someone else. And that also is very problematic in relationship, is incredibly codependent, and is also not sustainable. And that if you're putting that much pressure and that much reliance on someone else, that's so much responsibility for them to carry. And that's not fair to them, to your relationship, to yourself. And so that was just, aside from the loyalty bind, just that kind of codependency.
Mm-hmm.
Still, can have a therapist take on such a ridiculous show.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'd love to hear your takes on our takes. So definitely leave us some comments below. And if there are relationships that we didn't talk about, let us know. Some other relationships that we thought about, which we can also do like a part 2. I had thought about, from Pretty Little Liars, Aria and Ezra, Jessica Day and Nick Miller from New Girl. Of course, Ross and Rachel, of course. And then, like I alluded to, Carrie and Big, Rory and Dean, everyone. So there's plenty of other troublesome couples for us to talk about just in TV alone. So yeah, we'd love to hear what relationships you want our take on.
Yes.
But to hear us talk a little bit more about unhealthy relationships, definitely check out the full episode of our podcast. We have 2 about unhealthy relationships. So check out part 1 and part 2 up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.